I want to welcome Joel Valesquez and also Ann Berlack, who is joining us tonight. Joel is a Lakeview parent. Everybody's familiar with the Lakeview sit-ins. He's also a public education activist. And Ann Berlack is a former professor at San Francisco State University. Did I get that right, Ann? San Francisco State. And we are really fortunate to have her joining us in. We have yet a third parent coming through, so that would be great. The more the merrier. Welcome you guys to our channel. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We have a facilitator who will be putting up links as you speak, so anything you reference, we'll try to put it up in the chat so people can have it. And we also publish the WordPad afterwards so everybody can see the links you provided and all that and study up. So welcome. Thank you. I know it's getting around supper time you're in, so we'll go ahead and get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background involved with Lakeview, because we know less about you right now than we do Joel.
Okay. Well, I was an elementary school teacher in the 60s, and then I got a PhD and became a university teacher, first in St. Louis and then for the past 20 years at San Francisco State. And my special area of interest and commitment was promoting the teaching of social justice to elementary school children. I taught the social studies methods course because it wasn't considered basic. And then I taught the foundations of education course to all credential candidates, and I taught it as a social justice promotion course. And I was involuntarily retired after 25 years. Because there weren't enough people going into teaching at San Francisco State. And so I was trying to figure out my retirement, and by the grace of the higher power, I ended up in the same room with Joel one night at an Occupy meeting, and somehow I kept saying, I want to go back into the classroom and teach. That's what I want to do. I want to teach children in the same way that I have been advocating the teaching of my students who are going to become teachers would teach. And Joel heard me, and he arranged for me to go to Lakeview and teach in the late spring, before Lakeview was closed. And so I went in and taught in a first grade, a fourth grade, and a fifth grade, and I taught social justice. Now, I hope I'll have an opportunity to talk about what I was actually teaching these very young children, because many of your listeners may think, well, what does that mean for young children? But I had a wonderful time helping me teach. He's a natural. And then after the school closed, then we set up the People's School as part of the Lakeview sit-in, and I had the privilege of full school for the children, primarily children of the activists who were running the school, but also some children from outside the school as well.
Outstanding. And you've already hit on a point that had completely eluded me, and yes, we will give you plenty of time to speak to the curriculum because I'm interested in that, and good for you for teaching social justice to the kids. But when we talk about this public education and the attack on it, we very often focus on, well, what are the kids going to do? What are the parents of the kids going to do? But your story just made me realize San Francisco State being a public university, you were personally affected by the budget cuts and everything because of your employment there. And so, or maybe collateral damage to that bigger issue. And I think we don't even consider that a lot. So it's a much larger problem than we might think. So I'm getting a note that my audio is not working. Hold on just a bit. Pardon me. This is live stream. You know how it goes.
No problem.
Check 1, 2. Test. Okay, you may have to restart the Procaster. I'm sorry. Good audio. A bit. Is everybody good? All right, we're going to go. If we're having audio problems, if somebody wants to just tell me, I can adjust it on the fly. Happens sometimes. So if the producers will just let me know, I can bump it up a little bit, and there, we'll do that just for goodness. So, but back to my point, that the issues affect people all through that system, and I think it's something that's lost on us. So thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. Now, Joel, so how should I pronounce your name to get it correct?
It's correct either way. It's either Joel or Joel, whatever
Okay.
you prefer.
I'll say Joel because I'll mangle it somewhere along the line if I try to,
No worries, no worries.
Give us a little bit of background about your involvement with public education activism, how you came to that and why, and your specific involvement with Lakeview.
2 blocks from Lakeview for almost 20 years, before I had children over here in Oakland. And I have 2 school-age children. The third would have been starting at Lakeview next year. I got involved with that school not because it was the best school here in Oakland, because it was my community school, and I wanted to make the school in my neighborhood better and be involved. And once again, I was involved for 10 years. So it did really hit close to home when Lakeview got on a hit list to be closed. But I've always been involved in education as far as volunteering on the PTA, on the SEC, and trying to improve it where my children attended. And it was a catalyst for me to hear that they're closing 5 elementary schools, and we're going to close 25 or 30 more schools in the next 5 years, because that's what they were saying last year. And it just hit me. We've had our jobs taken away from us, our homes taken away from us. We've had libraries and parks, locally, shut down. And it just became a moment where I said, it's okay if things were disappearing for me, but now you've taken the one most important thing that is important to my children and my family and my community, and I just couldn't stand back anymore and let it happen. I just had enough. There was just no way that I could just sit back anymore and not get involved in a major way. So it just, for me, it was a catalyst, anything else away from our community. And like you said earlier in the show, this is something that's happening across the nation. This isn't specific to Oakland.
And had you been a community activist of sorts prior to that, either one of you? I think Ann, she has been an activist just by the nature of her teaching, but how about you, Joel? What was your story as far as an activist?
Before I had my children, I've never called myself an activist, but I was definitely involved in my community and things that were going on, and did protests and marches back in the 90s before I had children. But once I had children and became a parent, I wasn't as active in marches and protests. Definitely nothing at this level for a really long time as a parent. So there was a gap that I kind of sat back and started just being a parent and not watch.
Okay. Would you guys like to speak to the national issue of the attacks on public education, and then we'll focus down on Lakeview, or go the other direction, which seems to make more sense to you?
No, I think that's great. I think it's important that, and I think Ann can start if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
Well, we're all aware of the next unbelievable what's happening in Philadelphia and Chicago as far as closing schools. I'm extremely concerned, and I know Joel is too, with the whole testing mania, which is integrally related to power and control by the large educational foundations and philanthropic organizations, which are venture in the schools, what's being taught, what the curriculum is. And the curriculum gets narrower and narrower and is ignoring the role that the curriculum should play in preparing children for democratic empowerment. So but that's not coincidental, because the people that are actually pulling the strings on top, including Arne Duncan and the Department of Education, as well as prior administrations, really don't support education for democracy. They support education for skills for the job market, and they're very direct about that. And I understand there was an article that just came out today, which we all will be looking at probably tomorrow, that is showing that most of the jobs of the future are not going to be jobs that need very much academic skills. That what we really need in a future society is people that can govern in a society that will be good for everybody, that will give opportunities to everyone to enjoy a fuller life, or maybe to reorganize the way that work is allocated in this society so that there's more equality and less inequality in this society. The kids aren't learning anything about that. They're learning test prep for the most part.
Understand that. And would you say, not to put words in your mouth, but when we were talking about the public education week, you know, it's such a big subject, and one of my challenges personally was I'm a big proponent of public education, but I also feel like there are so many internal issues with that, like you just spoke to, that we're not educating children and people to think critically. The systems exist to teach them to be conformists and consumers and worker drones. So there's a lot left. So I'm at kind of at loose ends. I said, well, but should we attack public education for that? Absolutely not. We should make education socially and economically accessible and equal for all, and teach critical thinkers, people that will challenge the status quo, people that will challenge authority, and be problem solvers, not just, you know, agreeable. So I'm interested in getting into that a little bit more. What is the student population at Lakeview roughly?
Our population, well, this last year was 300, but within a 2-year period, we dropped over 128 students, because our CDC, our Child Development Center, was shut down. That was feeding our kindergarten. So after just a 2-year period, it dropped, once again, 128 kids. And so you can say whether it was intentional or malicious, they knew what they were doing. And some of the other school closures, we saw the same pattern where they were shutting down the pre-K program on site that was feeding the kindergarten, and the rest of the school shut down, and that affected enrollment tremendously.
And then they say there's not enough students, so we have to close it down.
Exactly.
It sounds like corporate doublespeak if you ever heard it, you know. So jumping again from the local to the national, as local activists at your local school and in your area, are you guys in contact with, you know, the national, at the national level, with other communities that have the same problems? Like, do you skill share and info share? Is there like any kind of a coalition nationally that works on these issues, or are we too early into that process yet?
Well, go ahead.
I think that there's a couple of parents groups that are really working in concert with each other and with us, and there's also some national testing organizations, Fair Test, for instance. Unfortunately, I don't know if I should say this, but the teachers' unions at the national level are really afraid to critique what's happening nationwide, and that is really too bad, because in a better world, the national unions, teachers' unions, would be the ones that would be working for the benefit of social justice and public schools. But they're not really doing that, in my opinion.
Right, and I would suspect...
And just to add to that, Mark...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to just say I suspect that might be an unpopular opinion amongst the unions.
Well, yeah, I think that is so.
Yeah, and I was going to add that, yeah, as far as being connected, I mean, there's some groups to the like Occupy Education Committee was a tremendous amount of help here. They're an amazing group of people that really supported this action, and we're starting to see that. So I think for us, for me, what I'm seeing is that the first step was to get in contact with local organizations or groups here in the city of Oakland. But what we're seeing out of this action, we're starting to see is that people are starting to reach out to us on a national level, and that's what we've been hoping for, to really connect the dots to realize that all of us are going through the same thing when it comes to school closures and public education. And so we can start sharing not just the organization, but some of our tactics, some of our actions, and what to do and how to kind of, I would say, time warp to kind of skip some of the stuff that may not work, because we've learned some things that we can do, and we've learned some things that don't work too well. And we would love to share that on a national level with people, and vice versa.
Yep.
There is a national opt-out of testing movement that's been highly successful in places like, believe it or not, Texas,
yeah.
Which means that parents get together and decide that they don't want the standardized testing, because the standardized testing is really driving the curriculum and taking up so much space that the other purposes of public schooling are falling by the wayside. So I think that the testing opt-out movement is a national trend that has a lot to offer people in specific separate states and communities to help them with to join in.
Right.
Right. And I just want to say there's just enough of a lag where I'm stepping over you every so often, and so I'll try to time it better because I don't want to interrupt. So I apologize for that. But it's kind of hard to gauge it.
And we'll wait too. No worries.
So you mentioned about your willingness and your desire to share your information, skills, and lessons learned, nationally. Have you been in touch with any groups and offered that up? And kind of what are their responses? Do you find that people are eager to accept the benefits of your experience, or is everybody more concerned with reinventing the wheel for their neighborhood?
Well, I would first take responsibility. I don't think we've done a great job trying to reach out. The few contacts that I have made, I think were made before this action, and people didn't really understand maybe what we were reaching out and really trying to connect. So I think we can do a better job on that first. But I do think that right now there is a lot of people reaching out to us to find out what are the next steps, what did you guys really do, how did you do it, and what can we do together. So I really want to focus on what's happening now, because I think this is the moment. This is one of the crossroads where we can start connecting with the East Coast and the West Coast and all the states in between, and really create a movement,
And that's one of the goals.
I would hope that this broadcast would help us to begin to reach out. It's really, we all spent a couple of weeks recovering from the action. It was very, very intense. And we really haven't gotten together. We're thinking of doing some writing and reaching out, and that is a very important project. Right now, I personally don't know of any groups that I'm connected with, but I was really narrowly focused on the school.
Right.
And the lessons that could be learned from the school.
Okay, and one of our goals with our channel is to do exactly what you're talking about. I'm hoping somebody from Harrisburg or somebody from Detroit or somebody stumbles on this and they'll watch it, and then somebody will send an email, and this is what our channel exists to do, is to build bridges between people, because I sit back and I say, I know of 5 people across the United States that are doing exactly the same thing. They all think they're operating in the vacuum, that they're not. All we need is a way to connect those people. So we're totally on your side with that, and it's a brilliant idea. So hopefully we can help. We're going to do our part. So let's get down to the Lakeview action. Maybe you could step us through the chronology of it. Like, what was the origin? We're really interested in how it was organized because organization not being a strong point of a lot of Occupy activities. So when we see successful models, we like to explore those to figure out how they were successful. So the chronology of
Right.
the action and how it was organized and, you know, what other groups participated and all that. So you guys have at it.
Sure. And there is a long story, so I'll try to keep it a little shorter. And it's important for people to understand that we tried as a community, not just at Lakeview, but all the families at the school closure sites and other organizations came together to protest and speak out at board meetings. I personally met with the superintendent. I met with almost every single board member. I met with directors in the Oakland Unified School District. We came up with proposals that would actually save the district more money. We showed them the Pew Report, which I'm sure you're familiar with, PEW, that explored closing schools in Philadelphia and other cities, that it didn't really save districts of the much, and other ideas. And we realized towards the end of the year, that they had an agenda already. I mean, it was clear that the superintendent, Tony Smith, here in Oakland, and I'm sure in other cities, there's an agenda, and they're not going to budge. It doesn't matter whether you're going to save them more money. This isn't about money. This is about taking over these buildings. This is about destabilizing the public education system. This is about charter school. That we really became to a point where we just couldn't take it anymore, and we knew that nothing else was going to change that unless we just took over education or the building ourselves. So
How long was the protest before?
the protest for almost an entire year. I mean, we started in September of 2011 when we first found out. You know, the thing important is that they didn't engage with any of these families. There could have been other proposals put on the table. We could have consulted this. And in Oakland specifically, the reason why we have so many school sites is because 10 years ago, our school district and our board decided to have a bunch of small schools because they thought they were going to have smaller class sizes. Well, that didn't work by Gates and Grove. And so, you know, there's a reason why we have so many school sites, and now we're making the children and the parents and families and the communities pay that price for their mistakes. And we don't feel that that's a good reason. But there was a catalyst, I think, at a town hall meeting where I spoke as far as getting towards the action that you want to know about. There was just a point where I said, I don't know what everybody else is going to do. And I was almost in tears. I was probably pretty upset at this point after a year. And I just said, you know, the town hall meeting probably had about 75 leaders from the community here in Oakland. And I just said, you know, I refuse to leave this school at the end of the year. And I hope that people stand with me. And I hope that people stand up, not just for Lakeview, but for all the schools that are in closure. And I think that resonated, and that started it turned the key, and there were some discussions and more discussions. And after I pretty much said that I'm not going to leave the school, I think people were like, yeah, let's support that. And I think that was the beginning, a pivotal moment as far as the action. And we spent months planning this at Occupy Oakland Education Committee, which is an amazing group of people. And we planned, we did we put out, what did we put out first? I'll let Ann pick up. We did outreach with all the parents that all would call kind of a survey to find out if they were interested in a legal action like this, if they would bring the kids to the school, what would they like to see at the school, what were the times. And so we started with the parents and school closures. And we met with parents, we tried to bring them into meetings, we met with teachers, and that was the starting point. And then as far as organizing the action and so forth, I mean, we met for hours and hours and hours discussing logistics. So there was a curriculum team that Ann was part of. There was a logistics team. There was food. And so there was all these different teams leading up to this action that dealt with different aspects of the action. And it was a small group. I would say in the beginning, between 30 and 40 people that were making this happen, literally.
And what was the community response on the front end as far as the surveys and the suggestions of an action like that? Was it mostly positive? Did you get a lot of support, or were people a little bit standoffish?
Well, it's really interesting, and I think it's still. I think this is really important to say that initially there was a lot of support. I don't think we got too many parents. I would say about 60% of the parents seemed to be interested in the action and said that they would want to do something like this. But I think when it actually came down to the action, we didn't see those numbers on the first day of school. And obviously there was police officers that came in and scared a lot of parents away. But I want to say that, I think all of us in society, it's been so long that we've done actions like this or got involved, physically involved, that a lot of people are timid. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about the unions or the teachers or the parents. All of society, in my opinion, is starting to feel the same way where they're timid. But I think we're seeing a change in that, not just here in Oakland, but across the nation and globally. And so people are understanding that you can do something positive, you can do civil disobedience, you can do it in an organized way, and you can do it in a peaceful way and a positive way. And guess what? The police are not going to know what to do about it. And so I think that was a process that was slow, and then as the days went on, more and more people started getting involved with the action. And I have to say there was a point for me, and I want Ann to jump in, there was a point where we were on campus, and it didn't seem like an action anymore. It just seemed like we were running a school, and people were coming and wanting to sign their kids up and didn't realize that it was an illegal action that the parents had taken over the school. I mean, I had that conversation over and over. I said, wait a minute, this is not because we were so organized that people just didn't understand what was really going on. It was just like a school running. So, but I want to let Ann jump in.
Well, I'd like to say that by the time we started to recruit for the school and for the sit-in itself and the tents, because people spent the night in tents on the school grounds,
Right.
The parents had all received letters from the school board or the Oakland Unified School District saying, where are you going to send your child next year, and giving them some first choice, second choice, third choice. And that was before we actually committed to the sit-in. So a lot of the parents had to go through that agony and commit themselves. It felt they had to. They were actually told, if you don't choose, there won't be a place for you next year.
We can't guarantee you a place.
Think of every one of those parents being told, this is a done deal, you better sign up and make up your mind and quit thinking about any alternatives.
Right.
So by the time that Joelle said, I'm going to sit in, many of the parents had already moved on. Many of the parents are working and many of them had already planned what their children were going to do in the summer as soon as the school was closed. And so I think that we were at a disadvantage on the first day of school, and every morning of the first week, the police showed up at 9 o'clock. When the parents were supposed to be dropping off their kids.
Yeah.
So we were so concerned to make, but the visual of the police lining up in front of the school was, I think, a deterrent to getting more parents to bring their children there.
Yeah.
These are parents who had tried activism during that year that Joelle is talking about. It was evidently, I wasn't even involved, but evidently it was a lot of energy and a lot of parental support. And what they learned from that is it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether you're an activist or not. You're not going to win anything. And I also found that many of the children were learning that too, because I was teaching in the school at the time, and then at the People's School. And the strongest lesson that they were getting is that you can't win anything from fighting, because I know I have a book to tell you about by Schultz about a whole year in which a sixth grade, I think it was in Chicago, the children organized to keep their school open. And at the end of the year, they found out that it was a done deal from day one, even though they were given hints that maybe it would work. So it was a done deal, and the children might have not known that it was a done deal, but they got the impression that fighting back doesn't work, and I think the parents were pretty demoralized.
Right.
And this is something that resonated. I think sorry.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. What is the demographic of the area the school's located in? Is it pretty diverse, or is it tend to be working class? Or I'm trying to get a feel, because I think this is an important point to make about how the police intimidated the community. And so I want to
Yeah,
know what that community was composed of. Was it working class people that feared for their jobs, and like the whole thing with the
absolutely.
Half the kids are busted.
say again?
I just did a little reading on this for something I'm writing, and Joel knows it more from the reality. But one of the things that's important is that half of the children were bussed in from other neighborhoods, many of them, I think, because they were being bused to a safe neighborhood. And I have a lot of evidence from my experience with the children. The school was majority African American and very Latino, Asian, and you can talk about the neighborhood that the school is in, but only half the kids were neighborhood kids.
Okay.
Well, and I want to clarify, when she say bust in, she doesn't mean bust in by the
Right.
school district. We mean by the
Right.
parents. So, yeah, Lakeview specifically is kind of in a business community. So there's two different issues going on. Only about 33% of the children attending that school were from the neighborhood of that school, besides the capacity issue, the enrollment. But the second part, you have to understand, in an urban area like Oakland, Lakeview is in this neutral place. And even though we're talking K through 5, it's a place where parents feel safe to bring their kids because it's not in West or East Oakland. It's in this place where it's convenient to get off. There's bus, there's BART, there's tons of transportation, and the families feel safe to bring their kids to a school like that. And I don't want to just focus on Lakeview because there's 4 of the schools that shut down just now. But there were working class, a lot of single parents, a lot of them that don't have around. They were using public transportation. When she say bus, she really means the bus.
Absolutely.
The public transportation bus. So that's important to know that, it's hard for these parents to make these arrangements to have other siblings at other schools to go 8 miles. And I sympathize with you, Mark, when you say it's 2 hours. I feel guilty for complaining that now we have to go to a school that's 8 or 10 miles away,
I think that kind of set the environment for us, because I think it's a really good indicator of what we're up against when the political decision is made, and I want to get to why that was made because you touched on it, but also that the police are used to intimidate by a show of force, basically against people with minimal resources to address that, and probably as much as they want to, not the ability to have the inclination to meet it head on. So it makes sense to me that everybody was in favor of the action, but when it came down to direct participation, you didn't have those kinds of numbers, because that's pretty daunting. And if you're a single parent with a couple of kids and you're trying to get food on the table and all that, to have the man there just waiting to just harass you for any reason would pretty much squelch anybody's voice, and that's just that's criminally wrong. So I digress. You can tell I have an opinion, right? So now I think
we agree.
Yeah, I think Ann was, you were speaking about the examples that the children viewed, that you're working the system, working the process, organizing, protesting didn't work, which blew in the face of what you're trying to teach them. So now's a good time for you to tell us about the curriculum, the social justice curriculum you're trying to teach elementary school students.
Okay, well, one of the themes that ran through all of my teaching was what is fair and just? What are the varieties of injustices in the world? But I focused there mostly not on racial or gender injustice, but on class injustices or being poor. And we did a lot of talking about why people are poor. I read a book on homelessness to the littlest children, and one child from the group told us about being homeless. One day I read that book to the school that I was teaching, and there were 2 homeless children that were there, and afterward, another adult in the room said, "You just had a big therapy session for these two homeless little boys who were there." So we talked about the causes of homelessness and poverty, but I guess what we really started with always was ideal community. What do the children think would be an ideal community, a community that they would like to live in? Of course, they could draw about that, they could talk about it, and it was just a marvelous experience. And I taught the word public. What is public? They didn't actually, they knew it was a public library and a public school, but many of the children, including the 4th and 5th graders, had no idea who pays for the public school. Somebody thought maybe Obama did, or who pays for the public library. So we talked about taxes, and I had a lot of fun with Monopoly money. I gave a few people all of the $100 bills that I had, but most of the kids got a couple of 20s, and I asked them, well, now we're going to pay taxes. I talked to them about taxes, and the taxes were the way that they were going to pay for all of the things they wanted in their ideal community. And they wanted things like swimming pools, and they wanted some things that would free food for everybody, jobs for everybody, churches, parks, that kind of thing. And then I asked them to pay their Monopoly money down under to signify what they thought were the most important public services that everyone should get, whether you're rich or poor. And then I asked them whether the person that had all these $100 bills should pay the same amount that the children who just had a couple of 20s should pay in taxes. So we got into that. But the most amazing first story that I usually tell is that when I first asked the first graders what they wanted in their ideal community, they said cameras. And Joel was there for that, right?
Yeah.
So why would they want cameras? What do the listeners think? What do you think? I didn't know. Did you know?
I didn't know when they first said it, yeah.
They want those cameras so that we can catch the criminals and that they can take pictures of them, the surveillance cameras. And that was really what was most important is safety. And these were many of the kids that were coming in from the less safe neighborhoods and had found Lakeview to be a safe haven for them. And so we, then they wanted to know, well, I tried to teach them who owns the schools. We do. Who owns the parks? We do. And then the brilliant first grader who says, well, if we own the schools, then why are they closing them down?
Yeah.
So that was led off in a whole other direction.
Yeah.
So those are just a few of the things that I put into my curriculum, but it was built on the experiences of the children. The child who says that his aunt is mad at his uncle because his uncle doesn't want a job at McDonald's and doesn't want to go work at McDonald's. All of the issues of the society are there in that classroom in first grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, and they don't ever have a chance to talk about those, but thinking about them from the very beginning, think about what should be public, what should we all enjoy, what should be the commons. It seems to me at this point something that we need to start our kids very young thinking about how we should all be responsible for one another. And of course, one other question that got up that was really important was this little girl we're talking about how much money the very rich people, the 1%, should pay for taxes. And she's asked, well, how do the rich get rich? You know? And so do they work harder? Are they smarter? Are they better? They hadn't heard of the word inheritance. You know, they hadn't even really thought about that. And these are all things that little children can learn.
And I just want to add real quick, you know, we also have organic gardening. We have people, these were all volunteers. We had art, we had music, we had teachers that were coming in teaching the kids how to drum and play music together. So there was a lot of things, even though there was a social justice kind of focus, there was a lot of things going on at the school that the kids just were excited to be learning. And we really started, even though we had curriculum and we were doing math and we were talking about taxes, we were still doing something that really resonated with these kids and we're getting them excited about learning. And it really changed. I volunteered at that school for 10 years, and I don't think I've seen a group of kids so excited than when we started the People's School. And it really told me right then and there that public education needs to change. Something else needs to be incorporated into this to get children excited about learning every day.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and launch into the People's School, because that's the jewel of this whole exercise. I mean, the sit-in brought the situation to a head. It gained some local focus, certainly, and a bit of national focus. And then, as most of those things go, there was the eviction, and that was very traumatic for everybody, and kind of it just had to be disorienting to the people involved with it. But out of all this rose the People's School, which is such a positive. I cannot get enough of that video. I just keep watching it because I'm going, now that's what school is supposed to be. So you've touched on bits and pieces of it. Most of the viewers don't know about the People's School in detail, so why don't you lay it out for them and show them what is possible when people come together?
Well, I'm excited to hear that someone else is excited that is getting what we're trying to do. And I think I just want to emphasize something before I get into it. We don't have to be afraid to do something, especially if it's right. And I mean righteous. Like, we did something we didn't do it because we were angry. We didn't do it because we were emotional. We did it because we wanted to show people how you can do something and positively affect your community. And even though they're calling it that it was trespassing, like we said earlier in the show, this was a public space. This belongs to me. Answer me, say, that school belongs to me. I've been there every day for 10 years, and I don't have a feeling that it belongs to somebody else. So you couldn't kick me out of my home. That school has been my second home, and I want everybody just to think about your public school in your community belongs to you. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It belongs to you. Do not be afraid to stand up and use that building for what it's for the community, for the children, and to teach and to come together. So I think if there's some things about the People's School, that's what it's about. We did this action, but we said we have to create a community hub, and that's what we focus on, and that's what we were doing. And Ann talked about the curriculum. We had a school Monday through Friday. That first Monday, we started on the 15th. On June 18th, at 9 o'clock a.m., we opened up the school doors and we started a program. And if it wasn't for the police officers scaring away a lot of the parents, I would say by that first week we probably would have had 100 or more students in that school, because we were doing it for free. It was a positive environment. The community was coming together. We were providing free lunches and breakfasts and meals for all the kids, and just this wonderful, fun space for families and parents and teachers and for community members to be. It was exactly what that school should have been, and it makes me really sad to say that in the 10 years, once again, that I was there, I didn't see that level of involvement in that school until we said, the people are taking it back and we're going to open this up to the community. How strange that we had to do an illegal action to get people to actually engage, to come in. Like, it was just this amazing thing. And I'm like, so our school system and our school districts are not really opening that door for the public.
Well, there was a wonderful, I guess, a Sunday night before it was closed, where we had an open house with food and a movie, and the community really started to come in. It was that aspect of the community school. But I want to emphasize that Lakeview was a wonderful school.
Yeah.
Even before it was the oldest school in Oakland. It was a beautiful building. It had a great garden in back where that we used in the People's School. But it was a very good functioning school with a lot of teachers that, had they been freed from the shackles of test prep and worried about what the API scores were, it could have turned into a really good public school. It was a really good public school, and it wasn't the fault of the teachers that it wasn't. It was the fault of from the highest water station and the school board that put all these fetters on what the teachers really wanted to do. But I agree entirely with Toel that we got to do that in that school, that enthusiasm. It could happen in the public schools if the teachers were just set free to do what they know how to do best, in which teachers 25 years ago were a lot freer to do. And then kids, there can be enthusiasm in public schools.
Well, the point that I was trying to make, and I'm glad that Anne clarified some of that, is that, I really feel strongly that part of the reason why that wasn't happening all before, and it wasn't the teachers or the parents, administrators, and I hate to call them out, but principals and sometimes don't become management and support the policies of the district, and the teachers end up and the parents end up over here. And I want communities across the nation or even globally to realize, don't let those if those administrators, that principal or vice principal or whoever's getting in the way of letting that happen, challenge them, because that's your school. And I wish that I would have challenged my principal that was actually in the way of letting that happen, because I could have made that happen if she would have got out of my way years ago.
And then she would have gotten fired.
And she would have gotten fired.
So it's not that, it's the tentacles of power start at the very highest reaches, and they circulate through the capillaries of the base.
Right.
That was a really good analogy there. I like that. It was so clear. And so when the People's School, came into existence, what was the response of the teachers that were formerly part of the school before it was closed down? Were you getting good participation and response?
No, and the reason for that is that the teachers, this wasn't specific to the People's School. Teachers are completely frightened to speak out. At the beginning of this juncture in September 2011, when it first was announced, we had teachers standing right next to us at school board meetings, just letting them have it. A phone call came from Denise Sadler, one of the directors, and completely shut them down and said, you cannot speak out at board meetings any longer. And I don't know what the specifics of that comment. It went to the principal, and the principal had a meeting with all of our teachers and basically said, you cannot be at board meetings letting board members and the superintendent let them know how you feel. They said, you got to let the parents stand up and let them do it. You cannot be involved in that process. I was told that by many teachers. So by the time this action started, even though we had a lot of support, passive support, almost all the teachers were like, we believe, go for it, but they couldn't get physically involved because their jobs, and we had teachers that weren't tenured, but then we had a teacher like Ms. Chen, 25 years, she taught both of my children, and she said enough is enough. She retired this year because of all of this drama, and she was there every day with us until she had to leave for a trip out of the country with students that she takes every year on her own time. So there was some support, but it had to be, unfortunately, a little passive because they were very worried about their jobs.
Right. So again, the economic, it looks like, which is sadly the case.
Absolutely.
What was you spoke to the community response that the police kind of squelched just by their presence, but how was it like on the streets, and did people respond? The neighborhood people and the people bringing the kids, were they all upbeat and positive about what was happening at the People's School?
Absolutely. I'll let Ann. All day, every day, people were coming. It came to the point where we actually had to start scheduling tours because we couldn't just let people just kind of wandering on the campus. Even though we wanted to do that, it became very difficult because we were running a school there. But all day, every day, if it was something as simple as a honk, all day, every day. The businesses were supporting us. The parents were supporting us. Everyone in that neighborhood were coming by, I would say almost 24 hours a day.
And talk about the table.
Yeah, we had a table. We had a kind of a check-in table where you would drive into our campus, and it had information, and people would just stop by all day. It's horrible what they're doing. We can't believe what they're doing, and we were just sharing and educating the public in so many levels of what was going on. Many people didn't even know not only Lakeview, but the other schools in our city were closing. So it was a kind of a wake-up call. I think that we were educating the public on support, and I believe, and I think the school district is really clear, if they didn't shut us down when they did, they would have had a really serious problem on their hands because there were so many people, like Ann mentioned, on the Sunday 2 days before the raid, we had a community dinner and movie, and we had 150 people, 175 people that we only did outreach for a couple of days. I mean, we just mentioned it, and tons of people. And if they would have waited any longer, I believe we couldn't keep people out at that point because there were so many people coming to support this action.
Right. What was the political response to the People's School?
As far as
school board, city council, all those kinds of people that were involved with creating the vacuum to begin with, and that for you guys to come in there and succeed, you can't deny it's a model for how things could be. So I was wondering what the political response was. Did they just, play it down, or was there any positive response politically at all? Or was it about like you would expect?
Well, yeah. It's about what you would expect. I mean, the mayor of Oakland, Quance, pretty much stayed out of it. She just said that they have no plans on moving in. What people need to understand, when we say police, Oakland Unified has its own police force that's separate from Oakland PD. And so those were the officers, with the assistance of OPD and CHP and Housing Authority, that came and raided us. But it was initiated by Tony Smith. Tony Smith, our superintendent here in Oakland, is the one that gives them orders. And he's the one that ordered to have that raid and have us moved out by the school police that are supposed to be there to protect children and parents, not buildings to have administrators move into. So Quam was kind of silent through the whole process. I think Oakland Unified School District, in my opinion, I would love to hear from Ann, were on the defensive. They changed the numbers. They said they were going to save $2.2 million to close these 5 schools. And just during this action, literally, they changed that number and said it was 5.7, trying to flip it as that we were squatters, or that somehow the action didn't really have that much strength. But the reality is that it absolutely did. I mean, we're hearing that from you. We're hearing that action was a complete success as far as getting support and getting people up and involved. And politically, there wasn't too much said besides the district kind of playing more defensive. They didn't really say too much.
Well, I think one thing to realize is that just before the sit-in, a report had come out about the Oakland police saying that they had overstepped their bounds. What else did it say?
I'm not totally sure about that.
Yeah, but it was a very critical report about the Oakland police. So evening after evening during our meetings, we were waiting for the police to come, and we did have the feeling that they really didn't want to get bad publicity again.
Yeah.
So we had some emissaries come from the school one night on his own to try to ask us to please leave.
Yeah.
And board members, they really didn't want to get another big problem on their hands, but we had decided that people who wanted to get arrested finally, Joel and one other person were going to stay, and the other people were going to leave peacefully whenever the police came. And so that's exactly what happened. Somebody had to say enough is enough, and it was probably Tony Smith who said, I heard that somehow it was the beginning of the fiscal year or something on the date that he finally decided that they were going to have to take people out. There was one person, the other man that got arrested, had actually gone to Lakeview when he was a child, and he said the first thing that they did after they closed the school, and I drove down there on that morning after I heard it had been closed, and they were putting new locks on because we had a key, and they knew that. And they put up a big chain link fence, and they destroyed the basketball court, which used to be a place for probably 75 years that kids would come up in the summer and play basketball.
Yeah, during the summertime.
Why did they need to destroy that? And then this other man said that he was nearly in tears. They just took all the desks out and junked them, just threw them. So the meaning of the school for the people. There was no evidence that they saw any reason to keep this vibrant, lively school. And maybe if we have time, Joelle can just say what happened to Santa Fe School, which is another school in the district, which is a story in itself.
And don't let me forget that, because I was going to ask, about what may have gone on with the other schools, but I want to stick with this for a little bit longer. So the political response is about what we expected. You took a stand along with the other person. So it was an eviction, but for the most part, I will say nonviolent, even though it's violence against intelligence and everything else. You know.
Right.
What was the media support like from mainstream media while the People's School was in progress and being so successful, and the aftermath? What was the mainstream media support, if any?
Well, yeah, no. I mean, the first 3 days there was it was buzzing 24 hours a day. I mean, media was showing and present in front of the school. The whole entire weekend. I don't think that they were really giving the real story in the beginning. I feel that mainstream media does what they do, and they were trying to flip it in the beginning as an Occupy event, or that it wasn't parents. But soon they realized, it's like, wait a minute. There are parents here, there are children here, and they backed off, and I think little by little the story was being told a little bit in the mainstream media. But, I feel that there was, after the first 3 or 4 days, there was this drop, and the media didn't really want to tell the positive story anymore. They were waiting for drama. And there was a lull, I would say, after the first 4 or 5 days, which is usually the media trend. They follow it in the beginning, and then they drop off until something happens. And that's pretty much what independent news like Oakland North, East Bay Express, San Francisco Guardian, they were doing stories, which was great. And the story was still coming out. There was our local KPFA and radio stations across the Bay Area, even as far as Sacramento, that were telling the story. So it didn't drop off completely, but the broadcast media dropped off 4 or 5 days, didn't really get involved in a major way until either there was a march, because we had marches the first weekend, that we had 300 to 400 people. We had the event on Sunday. So we had things that were going on where media would come, they would follow the rally, or the march, and then leave, and then up until the raid. But there was probably 7 to 10 day in between, out of the almost 3 weeks, that there wasn't a ton of broadcast media there.
Which is, as you said, that's typical. Exciting thing. They're on the front end, but the sustainability and the maintenance of such an enterprise, people find that boring because it's not sensational enough. And then when the drama hits at the end, they're right back there because it's dramatic and sensational. And I think the power in the story is what you guys did on a day-to-day basis, and that it can. So that brings me to my next question, and then we'll talk about Santa Fe and anything else you want to talk about. But we went through this evolution, the year leading up to it, then the summer of actually doing the People's School, and so all that's happened, and so you have this wealth of experience. So what are the next steps for the core participants and core organizers? What is do you have a plan, and what might it be?
Well, I'll let Ann jump. I mean, just today alone, before we went live with you, we were talking about doing a permanent People's School. So there's going to be a group of us sitting together and figuring out what that looks like as far as a long-term strategy. There's also some short-term strategies within the group that are talking about actions, which I don't know I can share, but also the political part, the electoral part. We have 4 board seats in our district available, and we found 3, we would say, grassroots that are people really connected to the community and not politicians, and we're going to be working on getting them elected in November. So we have, the short-term actions, marches or rallies are a possibility of another school being taken over. We don't know. We have the electoral part, the political side, which and the decisions being made. And then we have the people school that there's a lot of us that really, really want to make sure that happens and we carry that momentum in and make sure that it looks, it's not just an after-school program. I think we're feeling that it should be integrated into a school program, and we want to see that happen. Really, not just here in Oakland, but across the nation, when we're talking about the social justice piece. That's not just everyone hears social justice. I think the common person says, oh, it's some radical idea. But no, we all should know how our government works. We all should know how to get involved in our local politics and who to contact and how to make those changes and to address them. And I don't think we teach that to our children and to our parents. And that's why a tremendous learning experience for myself and all the parents involved to know who to contact, how to set up meetings, who are those key players that really make a difference in your public education, not just at your school, but in your district. So, that's extremely important.
Well, just a little bit on the curriculum. Children need to know from the beginning how power works. That it isn't, the government doesn't work the way they tell you in the, like you vote, one person, one vote by a secret ballot, and then you get what you want. And that is what's wrong with our curriculum right now. It's not the judicial system, the checks and balances and all of that stuff. What you really need to learn is how power works in this society, and children won't believe what they learn in school if it contradicts the evidence that they know that their parents don't have power, and that you can't just go to a voting booth and get power by voting. So it's much more complex than that. We are trying to decide where to go next. Some people may be interested in going to the recipient schools for children from the schools that have been closed and seeing what actually happens, because the closing of Lakeview is going to impinge, and the other 4 schools is going to impinge on some of the schools of the more privileged people. All of the schools that were closed were schools south of Shattuck, which means they were schools for the less affluent and the brown and black children. So the more affluent schools are being overcrowded. Closed schools feed out. And so it'd be interesting to see what's happening there. There are a range of different thoughts about what is our next priority, but a very strong commitment to trying to reach out to parents and have work with parents and teachers to help them to understand the big picture of education and schooling and public schooling and what's happening on the ground, because there is not a lot of information, and the major media is not doing a very good job at all. And that's why I really recognize the role that you are playing in trying to get the word out, to get an understanding, because we all know who controls the major media when all is said and done.
Well, we appreciate it, and we do what we can, and it's frustrating not only to me, but the team I work with, and then all the people that are involved in these alternative medias like this. I'm saying, this message needs to be in front of 1 million people. Not 100 people, not 1,000 people. It needs to be in front of 1 million people. It needs to be in front of 5 million people, because there's nothing you have said that is inflammatory, nothing that you have said that any reasonable person with a child would find to be radical and unacceptable. Environment for these children to learn and to be supportive of the community and everybody. That's what everybody wants. That's what all regular people want. It's not what the powers that be want, because then their days are numbered, right? But thank goodness you guys are doing that. So I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here is to work with. I'm going to give you another one. But I think it would be fantastic to create a self-published pamphlet or book or something with the documentation of this evolution that could be distributed for areas like my area or anybody that would want it. Just to go back to what Joel said earlier about lessons learned, mistakes made, helping people, like how to get that plan so people don't have to reinvent the wheel. Because what
Right.
you and your group have done is provide a model. And the kids that have been involved with this, they are just incredibly fortunate. So that's, you know, and there's the future right there. You're showing by example.
Right.
So we need to get that example out. Um, so now you can speak to Santa Fe or the other schools. And
Well, the only thing I wanted to say about Santa Fe, actually, they had a wonderful grandparent leadership, which I wanted to say was very, very interesting to me. A grandparent who's now running for school board first began to get her political feet when she was resisting the closing of Santa Fe School, where she used to walk her children to school. Next year, the special ed program is going to have to, she can't take her child, walk her child to school. The child is going to have to travel hours to get to an equally good or almost as good special ed school. But the thing that I think is just so remarkable, Santa Fe was the last public school in the whole zip code. It's being closed, and the children are going to have to go through 5 busy intersections to get to their school next year. And Santa Fe, they just put in hundreds of thousands of dollars in.
Almost $800,000.
$800,000 that they had put into Santa Fe to make it a most beautiful school. And what are they going to do with that school? They are going to be used as a school by nearby Emeryville, the .com center of the East Bay, so that the Emeryville children will be probably bused at public that used to go to Santa Fe are going to be walking past their old school to a new school.
Yeah, that Oakland taxpayers paid for, but now can no longer attend. But I do want to say, we touched, this story. I mean, it's great that we're telling our story, but I know for a fact after seeing clips and talking to you, Mark, and talking to people here and there in Philadelphia, whatever, the stories are the same. And the thing that we haven't really touched on, and we probably don't have time, is charter schools. I mean, so we have 5 schools shutting down, and 2 of those schools is going to be a charter in the same space. So in one sense, we have our superintendent and our school district said we don't have enough money to run. We're going to close the school, and 2 months later, we're going to open a school in the same space. And the kids from that school that live across the street can no longer go to school there because there's a charter school there that's going to have an application process and pick and choose who they can have. And that money is still coming from the taxpayers. That money is still coming from funds that should go from to traditional public education, and it's not, because the state of California has put millions aside to support charter schools, and it's one of the states, and I'm sure you know this, that has the most charter schools in the nation so far. And Oakland has the highest amount of charter schools per capita per resident, than any other city in the city. Paying attention that we're replacing traditional public schools with charter schools, and they're not fixing the problem.
And what, again, probably most of you viewers know, but charter schools are not public schools. They are not controlled by the public.
Or the school districts that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They're for the easy explanation is a corporate entity that's product is education, or education as they define it.
Right.
Follow-up question, because the one thing that are driving a lot of these closures is, to oversimplify, but it's a fact, is real estate. And how the land and the property that the school buildings on have suddenly become more profitable to be sold on the open market at the expense of the neighborhoods and the education. So are you guys seeing any of that in some of the situations you're involved with in and around Oakland?
Absolutely. I mean, Ann could jump. I mean, you're right on the money. It's real estate. And, I mean, I think what you said is right on the money, but I think there's also another side when you look at Oakland. Oakland Oakland is predominantly African American or people of color in this city. And so when you close a school and an entire zip code no longer has an elementary school, guess who has to move out of that neighborhood? You don't have to ask them to, but they're going to move because they no longer have a place to send their children in that neighborhood. And this is happening across Oakland. If you look at West Oakland, there's this focus by the city council and the city of Oakland to develop the real estate, and it's called the corridor. So they're focusing all their attention. Well, guess what? There's not too many schools, public schools left in West Oakland anymore. So you don't have to say there's a conspiracy theory behind that. They're literally shutting down schools to get some of the families of color, or those people that are in those neighborhoods, out, and so new folks can move in. And there's a push right now in Oakland to gentrify. I mean, it's not even a question. Everyone that's been here for 20 years and has eyes can see it happening right in front of us. And the schools are making that happen. I mean, so there's not a coincidence, in my opinion.
Well, the schools are very often what roots the community, because people want their kids to be able to go to good schools. So if the schools move or they don't exist anymore, of course, it reduces one of the reasons people would choose. I'm very cynical about such things, and I believe it is calculated and deliberate, and it's morally and ethically corrupt is what it is. Do you guys have time to take a couple of questions from the chat stream?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have Zena asks, will the actions be over when the school year in Oakland starts? And I think you suggested maybe you have plans in the works so the actions will not be over.
For me, I mean, my youngest daughter is starting next year. So what happens in Oakland Unified in Oakland is extremely important to the next level, and doing whatever I need is never going to end. I can't speak for every individual in the group, but I know that there's many individuals in other groups in Oakland that are planning other things. Let's just say that.
Okay, good. That's a great answer. And I have another question. What do either of you know of Michelle Ray, and what do you think about her?
Well, my immediate interest after being laid off from San Francisco State was to organize a protest at the Fox Theater in Oakland against Ree as she came to make a presentation as part of a series that I think cost $50 or $60 a head. Mm-hmm. We wrote some very fun materials, and there's a lot of fun materials to use to protest Ree. I just, her husband, I think the person who asked the question probably knows that her husband is the mayor of Sacramento, and he's got a lot of power around the schools in Sacramento to disaster.
Yeah, I don't know. I was there protesting also, so
we are going to make sure we say, okay, we feel that Michelle Ree is a disaster. Period. There we go. That was a great, succinct answer. I love that. The next question is, how do we most effectively get the general public to choose and challenge, and what has worked in your experience with your organization?
Well, outreach is always number one, and it takes time. Work with the organizations or the groups that are in your city that are addressing this problem and try to grow that. But I think Ann would agree, you have to get face-to-face with people. Sending out a flyer or sending out a Facebook event and not really engaging with the community, you got to start with the community you're part of first, even if it's just small. You have to get face-to-face with people over for dinners. Having a PTA meeting or having a town hall meeting in this abstract place doesn't always work. You got to get people into your home and make that personal connection and make people realize, this really does affect all of us. How can I get involved, even if it just means spreading the word for us? So I think face-to-face is key. We've had leaders in our country say that over and over again. But don't think that you're just going to make a flyer and an event and they're all going to come. And don't gauge your success, like you said early in the show. Don't gauge your success because you got 500 people out. you gauge your success on who you really connected to and who really resonated with your message. And it might be just a few people, but if a few people stand up and they get more people to stand up, that's what changes a movement. That's what gets people involved.
I agree with Joel completely. I think that we don't know the answer to that. That's an excellent question, and if the questioner has any ideas, we would love to hear from him or her. I picture in the fall, I hope, meetings with community leaders, having house parties, and us coming and attending and listening and making trying to figure out how to connect personally. There was a wonderful organizer that was working from, where is Jan from? Do you remember?
I forgot what country.
She's country, maybe in North Africa, and she's a black woman, and she was so organized that I wondered about her. I didn't know that she was from another country. I begin to think that it's really hard to organize people who've grown up in this country, that they have a much less willingness to protest and resist than many of the immigrants to this country. And I don't know what that means, except that it's a really hard job to organize. Mm-hmm. And I think I would use as my model maybe Cesar Chavez and the House meetings and the little that I know about the one-on-one, that we've got to just work face-to-face and small. But it is a very hard job because the media is convinced everybody that all they want is a school where there's high test scores. So the API test scores are, equal to the value of some real estate that a person has, and it's very hard to counter that. It's very hard to counter that.
I think you touched on a point that expands way beyond your project, but just overall, about how important the outreach is, and that it's startling because we have at our fingertips more communication devices than ever existed in the history of the world, and less communication taking place. There's a lot of noise, and so you're right. We have had this discussion this week, how difficult it is to organize 1,000 people. And there are great efforts made to do that almost all can go back to doing small groups, 5 people, 10 people, and build these small groups together that come together in coalitions to accomplish larger things. But the communication is key. The face-to-face is key. This is why we like to do video interviews. It's not as good as being in the room with you, but it's better than a phone call, right? It's certainly better than an email or a text. So yes, it takes time. No, it's not efficient, but there's so much value in having a conversation. So we're grateful for you guys to be willing to have one with us. And the last person that asked the question, they said, be sure to say thank you that you answered their question. They appreciated it. So I think
no problem. And contact us, sir.
I think we're going to kind of wrap this up. You guys have been with us for a good while, and we are so grateful. All the people watching are expressing their thanks. I think you got us thinking about a lot of things, and it's so good to hear the story of Lakeview and the lead up to it. I think that the year's worth of work prior to the actions and prior to the People's School is an extremely valuable lesson, because these things, when they work, aren't just accidental. It takes a lot, and you should be complimented for that. And the rest of your core group, please give them our thanks for the example. And those kids could not have any better examples of people to emulate than the two of you. And one day they're going to know it. And you guys are doing great and important work. So we respect you and we value you, and we will try to help. I want to thank all the viewers and the chatters, and I'm going to say my good nights to the chat right now. And if Joel and and we'll stay on for just a bit. I want to stop this and archive it so we can save it for posterity's sake. So, chatters, I'll be on in just a minute. Susie, thank you for facilitating tonight. Oh, yes, go right ahead. You had something?
Well, we just want to say, we want to continue everyone, I did, I'm sorry, yeah. We do want everyone to come out and keep contacting us, not because just to tell our story, we want to hear what's going on across the nation because we know this is happening and we want to connect. I mean, that really is, I think, important for all of us to do. So please, pass the information to everyone so they know how to get in contact with us so we can really connect and help each other out and what's working and what's not working. I would love to hear from other people across the nation.
Okay, and after my little spiel about communication, I'm going to throw a kink in the hose. Do you have a Twitter account, Joel, or does Lakeview or your organization have a Twitter account?
We did. We're probably going to have to change it because it was called Lakeview Sit-In, so it was specific to the sit-in. It's still up, so you can find it, and then we'll try to direct people to what the new Twitter account will be.
Okay, I hate to say it, but apparently it's the single best communication distribution tool out there, so you have to use it. I can't believe I'm saying that, but because of what I do now, I've started using it, and we couldn't live without it. So, and there was one other question for Ann. One of the people asked if you would be willing to share your class outline syllabus or exercises for your social justice classes you taught the kids.
Well, I sure would, and actually, I'm writing some stories about some chapters of books that really lay it out in a way that's probably more accessible than a outline. But I would be delighted to share it with anybody. Shall I give my email account? I'm in the dark ages. I have email.
Actually, no, email's good. Why don't you have Joel send it to me, and then we'll distribute it?
Okay.
How's that sound? We'll put it.
Okay.
Okay. That way, it just keep you from getting a bunch of junk. So, just have Joel send that to me, and I'll make sure the person gets it, and we'll maybe put it on the pad and all that so people can have it. Thank you for that.
Great.
That's very generous. So I'm going to say good night to everybody, and I'll be back on with you in just a moment. Just give me 5.
you.